I'm Jason Colvin.
I'm D. Graves.
Give us 5 minutes.
And we will give you the fire. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Surely You Can't Be Serious podcast, special edition, 5 Minutes of Fire. We are here talking about the lyrics of We Didn't Start the Fire by Billy Joel. We're covering only 5 minutes at a time, which is about the length of the song, so it works out kind of nicely. So please join us as we dive into some new lyrics today.
All right, guys, so here are the topics that we're going to be covering today.
The Catcher in the Rye.
Eisenhower.
And Vaccine.
And the Catcher in the Rye. Eisenhower Vaccine.
Okay, Dee, what can you tell me about The Catcher in the Rye?
Okay, so The Catcher in the Rye was initially supposed to be an adult book, but it found favor with a bunch of kids. It became a humongous success. Now, the author of the book, J.D. Salinger, didn't like the attention that he was getting, and so he went into hiding, tried to avoid all publicity. But the book, it is a lasting book that just never dies because the Holden Caulfield character in the book, his angst and frustration with the world around him is something that is universally shared over decades of time. What's interesting is it is a book that for some reason in the 60s started to get on the list to be banned from high schools and libraries. But what's an interesting fact about it is it's associated not only with this angst, but with several assassination attempts that are very famous, including Robert John Brando's murder of Rebecca Schaefer, John Hinckley Jr.'s assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, and after he shot John Lennon, Mark David Chapman was arrested with a copy of the book that he had purchased that day, and the note in the book was, "To Holden Caulfield, from Holden Caulfield, this is my statement." As I mentioned, he kept himself out of the limelight, and according to Kevin Nealon on Saturday Night Live News, it was to tell everyone it's actually pronounced Salinger. All right, Jason, what can you tell me about Eisenhower?
Okay, David Dwight Eisenhower served as the American president from 1953 to 1961. That's our 34th president. He was born in Denison, Texas, raised in Abilene, Kansas, graduated from West Point in 1915. He went on to become the supreme commander of the Allied Expeditionary Force in World War II, but he never saw active combat in his 35 years in the military.
Wow.
So he's in charge of what we call the invasion of Normandy, or D-Day. He ran for president. His primary goal was containing communism and reducing the deficit. Thank God we got that under control. In 1953, he actually considered using nuclear weapons to end the Korean War. He ended McCarthyism by openly invoking executive privilege. He signed Civil Rights Act of 1957, integrating schools in Little Rock, which we'll talk about very soon. He also led the American response to Sputnik to help create NASA, which launched the space race. Died of a heart attack in 1969. That's Dwight Eisenhower. All right, Dave, what can you tell me about vaccine?
Okay, so the vaccine that we've got to be talking about here is the vaccine for polio. Polio virus had been around for decades by the time the 50s rolled around, and it was epidemic. In 1952, a guy named Jonas Salk came up with a vaccine that was passed. He is widely regarded as the guy who cured polio. And just to tell you how bad it was, that year, normally there were 25,000 cases a year. That year there were about 58,000 cases. So it was extremely important to people that, some of the kids' biggest fear was getting polio. So they engage on the biggest medical experiment that has ever been done. Started off with 4,000 kids in a high school and ultimately encompassed about 1.8 million people. Now, what's sad is only about 400,000 of those folks actually got the vaccine. About 200,000 of them got a placebo, and the other 1.2 million were just the control group. They didn't get anything at all. They announced the results of the field test on April 12th, 1955. You'll remember that's the 10th anniversary of the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who probably was paralyzed as a result of polio symptoms, but the vaccine had been 60 to 70% effective from the poliovirus type 1, 90% effective for the poliovirus types 2 and 3, and 94% effective against the development of bulbar polio. By 1957, the cases were reduced to 5,600 100 in the U.S. By 1961, there was only 161, and eventually throughout the world, countries would become what they called polio-free. The most recent one, 2014, India was declared polio-free. Side note, a quote I remember from a Doonesbury book that I read back in the 80s. From Cher.
Yeah?
She said, I believed I was an angel sent from heaven to cure the polio vaccine. And when Jonas Salk did it, it really pissed me off. Okay, guys, that does it for today's episode. Join us next time for 5 Minutes of Fire.